WHGE 95.3 FM. Coming up, the Open Eye.
Those of us that indulge in or commit intellectual violence don't do so for the pleasure of mental masturbation or ego diddling. We do so because the chains of oppression on our people's minds are deep and difficult to remove.
Good morning, my children of the sun. Welcome to the Open Eye on WHGE 95.3 FM. I'm your host, Third Eye Optometrist Patrice Gibbs, here to get that third eye open. And as we always start off, every generation has its purpose. Ours is to reveal the truth and reverse the brainwashing. Let me get my disclaimer out the way. All right.
The views and opinions expressed on Open Eye are those of the hosts, guests, and contributors, and do not reflect the policy or position of WHGE 95.3 FM nor our sponsor, the Delaware Center for Homeless Vets. Any content provided by Open Eye's hosts, guests, or contributors are theirs and are not intended to malign any religion, ethnic group, company, or individual.
All right. Hey, Sherry, how you doing, sister? Yes, D. Let's get them started. Right here. All right. On the Open Eye. This is the station where we do not confuse patriotism with silence, tradition, with truth, or celebration with liberation. All right. What is the day? The day is the 4th of July. Yes, indeed. America's 250 years old. One of the saddest celebrations America has probably ever seen. You see the crap the Orange Disaster had, I guess in front of the White House. This dude just tearing stuff up like crazy. Yeah. Nobody showed up at that thing. And them Fox News people, I don't even know if you call them brainwashed. They're just so full of it. Now, nobody was at this 250th thing that Trump is hijacked or whatever. And they on there talking about, oh yeah, there's tens of people there. As if they were saying there's thousands there. There's tens of people there. 13 people there. Jeez Louise. Yeah, America's 250 years old. 250 years of declarations. 250 years of promises. 250 years of America telling the world what it believes, and black people forcing America to confront what it actually does. Oh yeah, there's going to be flags waving and fireworks exploding. There are going to be parades and marching and politicians giving speeches about freedom, liberty, equality, and justice. You don't know a damn thing about that. Because somewhere in the distance, I can still hear the voice of Frederick Douglass asking, what to the American slave is your 4th of July? That question was asked in 1852. And let me tell you something, the reason it still makes people uncomfortable is because America has never fully answered it. America celebrates freedom in 1776 while slavery continued for nearly another century. And people was out picking cotton. America celebrates the Constitution while black people counted as fractions of a human being. America celebrates the Founding Fathers. Come on, y'all. All right. Yeah, America celebrates the Founding Fathers while many of those same men held human beings as property. America celebrates emancipation while Reconstruction was being betrayed. America celebrates the Civil Rights Movement while the Voting Rights Act is continually attacked. America celebrates Dr. King while condemning every generation of protesters who followed his example. America celebrates black history while trying to control what parts of black history can actually be taught. So today, I'm not asking black people to hate America. I'm asking black people to understand America. Those are two different things. Understanding America means recognizing that nearly every freedom black people possess today was paid for. Paid for in blood, in jail time, with lost jobs, with bombed churches, with burned communities. It was paid for by people whose name history remembers and thousands more whose names were buried with them. Freedom was never handed to us. We organized for it, marched for it, litigated for it, boycotted for it, we fought for it. And yes, some of our ancestors died for it. That's why this program exists. Because the greatest danger facing oppressed people is not simply ignorance. It's organized amnesia. It's forgetting how we got here, forgetting what was done to us, forgetting what our ancestors did in response. And forgetting that every generation has an obligation to protect what the previous generation struggled to achieve. Every night, I petition the ancestors for guidance, and every morning, the ancestors charge me to sound the alarm. So that's exactly what we're going to do today. We are going to ask uncomfortable questions. We're going to challenge convenient lies. And we're going to talk about politics, history, power, economics, race, and the condition of black people in America and throughout the African world. We're going to look where others refuse to look because we were given two eyes for looking, but you only need one open eye for seeing. Children of the sun, welcome to the Open Eye. WHGE 95.3 FM. This is the Open Eye. All right. Let me start at home. I think it was Tuesday night. Some activists held a town hall meeting, march, and rally to address the shooting of the 19-year-old Kadir Skinner by the police. And of course, as usual, the police and the mayor put out a joint statement. Okay? This is their statement. In the spirit of transparency, that's how they started. And in alignment with our commitment to only share accurate and verifiable information, we are sharing additional details that Wilmington Police Department was able to confirm today. This came out Wednesday, day after the march and rally. We know that questions remain. We do not have all the answers, but we are committed to pursuing the truth. While this incident remains under active investigation by the Wilmington Police Department's Criminal Investigation Division and Office of Professional Standards, as well as the Delaware Department of Justice, the Wilmington Police Department can now share a few details. All right. An investigation conducted by the Delaware Division of Forensic Sciences determined that Kadir Skinner sustained a single gunshot wound to his upper left buttocks. Following the shooting, and once it was discovered that Skinner had been injured, a police officer on scene transported him to the hospital in an attempt to seek medical care. In the aftermath of the shooting, police officers on the scene recovered a firearm, a loaded .45 caliber handgun with an extended magazine. In addition to ballistic evidence, all materials were provided to forensic technicians for analysis and preservation as part of the ongoing investigations being conducted by the Wilmington Police Department and independent investigation by the Delaware Department of Justice. As a follow-up to the June 25th meeting that previously took place between family members and Chief Wilfredo Campos, Wilmington Police Department extended an offer for the family to see the body-worn camera footage. The offer remains open for them to accept at any time they are ready. This is an ongoing investigation, and further information will be released when possible. We ask the public to have patience and allow the investigation to continue so there can be a thorough account of events, transparency, accountability, and trust. That's from the Wilmington, Delaware. That's a Delaware joint statement from the mayor and Chief Campos of the Wilmington Police Department. You know what? So Wilmington officials released their official statement on the shooting of Kadir Skinner. And let's not sugarcoat this. It reads like the same script this city has been using for years. A script polished enough to pass for transparency, but hollow enough to lead a community with more questions than answers. They tell us Skinner was shot once in the upper left buttocks area. Listen to that phrase. That's not medical language, that's damage control. That's linguistic sidestep meant to make a gunshot sound like a bruise. The boy died. Is the boy saying back? And he shot in the back. And the boy saying spine. And the boy saying anything that might force the city to confront the possibility that the shot hit a man who was not facing the officer. Then comes the classic Wilmington line. A .45 caliber handgun was recovered. The city drops that detail into every police shooting statement like clockwork. It doesn't tell us if Skinner was holding it. It doesn't tell us if it was on him. It doesn't tell us if it was found later. It just plants the ideal: danger, threat, justification, without providing the facts that prove any of it. And what do they leave out? Pretty much everything that matters. No explanation on why the officer fired. No description of what Skinner was doing. No clarity on commands, compliance, or movement. No timeline of events. No acknowledgement of community concern. No accountability. We got the predictable reassurance that officers transported Skinner to the hospital, a detail that always arrives after the harm is done. And we hear that the family has been offered access to body camera footage. That offer is standard. But let's be honest, Wilmington rarely releases footage publicly until the Department of Justice finishes its review. And that process can stretch into seasons. Then the statement ends with 3 big words in capital letters: transparency, accountability, and trust. But you don't build trust with slogans. You build accountability. You don't build accountability with silence. And you don't build transparency by repeating the same carefully controlled, strategically limited message this city has been using for years. Woman then says it's committed to pursuing the truth. The community is committed to making sure that the truth doesn't get buried under procedure, press releases, and polite language. Because at the end of the day, the public doesn't need branding. The public needs answers. This is the Open Eye. WHGE 95.3 FM, the Open Eye. Hey, Vaughn, what's up? Hey, the boycott's working. How you know? Oh, we know. Oh, the Asian store boycott. It didn't come out of thin air. It erupted from a long simmering wound. When Rick Chow was found not guilty in the killing of 14-year-old Cyrus Carmack Belton, a child whose life was extinguished over a false accusation in a bottle of water, black communities across the country reached a breaking point. People describe that if the courts would not deliver accountability, then economic pressure would. Excuse me. And let's be honest. The initial reaction from many Asian-owned businesses and commentators wasn't introspection. It wasn't solidarity. It wasn't even neutrality. It was defiance. It was mockery. It was the same tired model minority rhetoric weaponized yet again, a narrative historically engineered by white institutions to pit communities of color against each other. Now, some voices openly declare that Asian businesses don't need the black dollar. Oh. As if the very neighborhood sustaining those stores for decades was irrelevant. As a black consumer base that kept those doors open was disposable. Oh, okay. One viral video featured an Asian man claiming black people were jealous of the model minority. Jealous of a stereotype designed to discipline black people and reward proximity to whiteness. Jealous of a myth that erases the diversity, struggle, and inequality within Asian communities themselves. Jealous of a narrative that has been used for 60 years to deny systemic racism against black people. Well, reality answered. Because the boycott is working. Across multiple cities, Asian-owned convenience stores, beauty supply shops, and corner markets that once relied heavily on black customers are now empty. Foot traffic has collapsed. Revenue has cratered. And bankruptcy is not a rumor, it's a trajectory. When a business builds its entire profit model on a community while refusing to respect that community, the math eventually catches up. The math is mathing, and now the panic is setting in. Oh yeah, they panic. Oh, reports are circulating that some store owners are vandalizing their own shops, trying to blame black people, and collect insurance money. If that's true, that's not just desperation, that's fraud layered on top of racial scapegoating. That's the same old playbook. Harm the community, blame the community, profit off the community. But you know the most astonishing development is the claim that some Asian groups are allegedly pushing for an amendment to the Asian hate crime bill. Now check this out. Not to address violence, not to address discrimination, but to make it a hate crime for black people to boycott Asian businesses. Now let's pause on that for a minute. A boycott, a peaceful, constitutional, historically black method of protest being reframed as a hate crime. Economic self-determination being criminalized. That's what they want. Choosing to support black-owned businesses being treated as an act of racial aggression. What the hell? So the demand is what exactly? That the government force black people to spend money in Asian stores? That's what y'all want? That black economic autonomy be declared illegal? You get caught spending with a black person, that's a hate crime against Asians? You in a black business? It's a hate crime? Yeah, that's right, Sheriff. They want to tell black people where they spend their money by law. That black people be compelled by law to financially support businesses that disrespect them. That's not just absurd, that's authoritarianism. It's anti-democratic, it's economic coercive, and it reveals the truth. Some people don't want partnership with the black community. They want dependency from the black community. They want the dollar without the dignity. They want the profit without the accountability. But here's the part they didn't anticipate. Black people have options. Black people have power. And black people have memory. And black people have precedent. From Montgomery to Greenwood, the divestment movements of the 1980s to the divestment movements of the 1990s. Boycotts are not hate. Boycotts are not violence. Boycotts are not discrimination. Boycotts are political language. One black America has mastered out of necessity. If a community decides to redirect its spending towards businesses that respect them, that is not a crime. That's empowerment, a strategy, and it's survival. And if the boycott is working, it's because the message is clear. Respect is not optional. Accountability is not optional. And the black dollar is not guaranteed. If you want the community support, you must support the community. If you want black patronage, you must value black lives. If you want black money, you got to stop treating black people as expendable. Economic power is political power. And black America is using it. Yeah. This is Open Eye. All right. Peace, Brother Jakeem, Brother Mishba. And hey, Dave. All right. Let's get back to the show. WHGE 95.3 FM. This is the Open Eye. All right. You know, it's just for people that still insisting that Donald Trump somehow hijacked the Republican Party. And Brother Ta-Nehisi Coates offers a far more accurate diagnosis. Trump didn't hijack the Republican Party, he exposed it. That racism was already there. The resentment was already there. The politics of white grievance, that was already there. Trump simply stopped speaking in codes. And as Coates puts it, the latent racism of the Republican Party, which has been there since the Southern strategy, was the kindling. And Trump just lit the flame. But it's always been there. It's always been there. And that is the part of the conversation America keeps trying to avoid. There's this desperate attempt to portray Trump as some strange political accident, as though the Republican Party was sailing peacefully along, committed to racial equality and democratic inclusion, until one orange-haired reality television star suddenly stormed the bridge and took control of the ship. That's BS. Trump is not a departure from the Republican Party's modern political trajectory. He is the logical conclusion. The Southern strategy did not begin with the orange disaster. The exploitation of white racial resentment did not begin with Trump. The demonization of black communities, immigrants, welfare recipients, protesters, civil rights activists, and so-called inner cities did not begin with Trump. Trump simply removed the euphemisms. Before Trump, they talked about states' rights. They talked about law and order. They talked about welfare queens. They talked about urban crime and forced housing. They talked about taxpayers versus takers. They talked about Barack Obama being un-American. Trump came along and realized something important. Much of the Republican base no longer needed the dog whistle. They were ready for the bullhorn. And that's what changed. The message didn't fundamentally change, the volume did. And the mask just came on. See, what the orange disaster understood, old poopy drawers, that there was a political market for saying openly what Republican politicians had spent decades communicating through coded language. He understood that the resentment was already cultivated, already organized, already waiting for someone willing to weaponize it without embarrassment. Whigs or us did not plant the seeds. He harvested the crop. That distinction matters because if we convince ourselves that Trump is the disease, we will believe removing Trump cures the patient. It doesn't. Trump is a system of something older, deeper, and far more dangerous. A political tradition that repeatedly turns racial anxiety into electoral power. So stop telling people Trump hijacked the Republican Party. That's BS. You can't hijack a vehicle that's been traveling in your direction for decades. Trump just stepped on the gas. Ta-Nehisi Coates is right. The killing was already there. Trump just lit the flame. The question now is whether America has the courage to confront the people who spent decades gathering the wood. I doubt it. All right. Now, I'm going to say this with my full chest, because it needs to be said plainly and without apology. Clarence Thomas is a despicable son of a bitch. And he built an entire judiciary legacy on distancing himself from the very community whose struggles made his rise possible. That's not hyperbole. That's his record. This is a man who spent decades positioning himself as the lone dissenter whenever the rights, citizenship, or humanity of black Americans are on the line. Look no further than his dissent on birthright citizenship, where he went so far as to invoke language that included the term Negro in a modern Supreme Court opinion. A choice that tells you everything about the worldview he's operating from. It wasn't a slip, it was a signal. And let's be clear, Clarence Thomas is not a figure rooted in the black American diaspora. He does not speak for us, stand for us, or move in coalition with us. He has spent his career rejecting the very traditions, struggles, and communal memory that define Black America. He is a man who benefited directly from affirmative action, from DEI, from the doors opened by Black activists, Black organizers, Black institutions, and then dedicated his life to slamming those doors shut behind him. Thomas didn't climb the ladder. He was lifted up by the work of others and then pulled the ladder up so no one else could follow. And let's talk about the myth making around him. He is not a towering intellectual, not by a long shot. He is not a distinguished legal mind. He's not a jurist whose writings will echo through history. What he is and what his record shows is a man that's repeatedly aligned himself with the most reactionary interpretations of the Constitution while claiming he has some divine insight into the minds of the founding fathers. Founders who, let's be honest, would not have seen him as a colleague, a peer, or a fellow citizen. Silly son of a bitch. They would have seen him as property. That's a tragic irony. Thomas has spent his career defending the worldview of men who have denied him every right he now uses to undermine others. And this isn't about personal dislike. But how could you, as a Black person, how can anyone as a decent, moral thinking person with any values not dislike this bastard? But it's about the consequences of his jurisprudence, the communities harmed by his decisions, and the historical betrayal embedded in his legacy. Yeah, Clarence Thomas has chosen his side. It's not ours. This is The Open Eye. I'm Patrice Gibbs. Yeah, the mic is off. Fuck him. WHGE 95.3 FM. This is The Open Eye. Yeah. The education advocacy station. Tune in here, you're gonna learn something. Follow the money. Yeah, that's the oldest rule in Washington. But today it reveals a truth that the Democratic leadership desperately wants to hide. Let's look at the numbers. Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer and House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries like to call themselves the leaders of the modern Democratic Party. But their true loyalty isn't to the voters. It's to a foreign policy lobby that has systemically bought their silence and their votes. According to public data compiled by Track APAC and Open Secrets, Chuck Schumer has pulled in $1,727,000. And that's from the pro-Israeli lobby. Hakeem Jeffries, and he ain't far behind, pocketing $1,742,000. They aren't representing New York. They are operating as the pro-Israeli lobby's chief agents within the Democratic Party. And as long as these two genocide-enabling AIPAC puppets remain in power, progressive change is dead on arrival. And the rot goes far deeper than just the leadership. Out of the 45 Democrats currently sitting in the United States Senate, 17 are funded by AIPAC. Across the aisle, out of the 53 Republicans, 11 are on the same payroll. Think about that math. Out of 98 senators sent to Washington to represent the American people, 28 of them are bought and paid for by a single lobby. That is nearly 30% of the entire Senate. More than enough to sway any crucial vote, and these bastards are in leadership. That's more than enough to sway any crucial vote, dictate foreign policy, and block any attempt at ceasefire or humanitarian justice. Meanwhile, the leadership is completely out of touch with its own base. Recent polling shows 77% of Democrats no longer support Israel's actions. The voters are screaming for peace, but the politicians are listening to the checkbooks. If the Democratic Party ever wants to make real progress, it starts with a clean slate. Chuck Schumer, Hakeem Jeffries must be removed from leadership. It's time to take our foreign policy off the auction block. That's real talk. They need to go. Now here's something else the political establishment does not want to talk about. The reason democratic socialists are gaining ground is not because everybody suddenly started reading Marx. Hell, half of them don't even know who the hell Marx was, Karl Marx. It's not because the entire country woke up one morning and decided to debate political theory. It's because people are tired of politicians who campaign for 2 years, win an election, take office, and then spend the next 2 years explaining why they can't do a damn thing they promised. Then somebody comes along, gets elected, takes office, and actually tries to do the job. That is a political danger represented by Zohran Mamdani. The establishment can talk about the parades he attends or doesn't attend. They can argue about his faith. They can attack his position on Israel and Palestine. They can analyze every handshake, every speech, every photograph, and every damn suit he wears. They could talk about him jumping into a swimming pool with his suit on and act like Western civilization collapsed into the deep end with him. But here's the conversation they don't want to have. Is he delivering? Because that's the question that terrifies the political establishment. For years, establishment politicians have trained the American people to expect nothing. Vote for us, but don't expect much. Give us the House, but we need the Senate. Give us the Senate, but we need 60 votes. Give us the White House, but the parliamentarians said no. Wait until the next election. You know what? Send in another donation. You got to vote harder. Just be patient. You know what? Lower your expectations. Yeah. And somehow, mysteriously, there's always enough political will to fund war, subsidize corporations, rescue banks, expand police budgets, and give tax advantages to wealthy people. But when working people ask for affordable housing, that was shot down right here. Now, I ran into a politician and told me the funding wasn't there. Health care, better schools, public transportation, child care, or protection from predatory rents. Suddenly everybody in Washington becomes a constitutional scholar explaining why nothing could be done. That is why politicians who actually deliver are dangerous to the system. Because once somebody demonstrates that government can act, everybody else loses the excuse. That is what establishment Democrats and the political right were afraid of. Not simply that Mandani would win, but that he would actually govern. Because if a politician campaigns on improving people's lives and then actually starts improving people's lives, the public begins asking an uncomfortable question. What the hell have the rest of y'all been doing? Republicans spent their time worshiping at the altar of the orange disaster, competing to see who could flatter him the most, defend him the loudest, and surrender their dignity the fastest. You've been changing his diapers. Meanwhile, too many establishment Democrats have perfected the politics of managed disappointment. They raise money by warning us how terrible Republicans are, then offer working people the political equivalent of a cold sandwich and tell us to be grateful because the alternative is starvation. Excuse me. People tired of that bargain, man. And whether the political establishment likes it or not, democratic socialism has moved into the center of the national political conversation because its candidates are speaking directly about material conditions: rent, food, transportation, health care, wages, housing, the cost of simply staying alive in America. You can call people radicals all day long. What's radical about rent and food? But when somebody can't afford the rent, they don't give a damn about your political vocabulary. They want to know one thing: can you help? That's why Mandani has become more than one politician. He's become a political test case. Can a candidate reject the traditional establishment playbook, build a grassroots movement, speak unapologetically about working class economics and win an election, and then govern effectively? If the answer is yes, the consequences reach far beyond New York City, baby. That's why every mistake will be magnified. Every controversy will be amplified. Every personal disagreement will become a national headline. Because the real threat isn't the label Democratic Socialist. The real threat is competence. The real threat is delivery. The real threat is a politician demonstrating that campaign promises don't have to become campaign memories the minute the election is over. And now, heading toward the November 2026 election, the midterms, voters across the country are going to have to make a decision about what kind of politics they want. Politics is theater or politics is work. Politicians who tell you why nothing can change, or politicians willing to be judged by what they actually accomplish. Because once voters see that government can work differently, the old excuses start sounding exactly what they are. Excuses. That's the lesson establishment politics should be paying attention to. The people are not asking politicians to be kings. They're asking them to do their goddamn job. And any political movement that remembers that basic fact is going to be a force that neither party establishment can afford to ignore. I ain't done with your ass. No. This is the Open Eye. I'm Patrice Gibbs. Hey, Rhonda, I see you there, sister. Oh yeah. Yeah, got people texting me, Happy Independence Day. Yeah, you must not be listening to the show. You might want to tune in with your Happy Independence Day ass. All right. WHGE 95.3 FM. This is the Open Eye. You know, let me add something else. Democrats are dismayed, confused, frightened, or offended by the rise of democratic socialism in America. You need to understand something. This didn't happen in a vacuum. This is a direct repudiation of your failure. You had millions of people vote for you because they believed you would stand against a radical political movement hell-bent on undermining the basic tenets of freedom, fairness, justice, and democracy itself. And what did too many of you do? You gave speeches. You sent fundraising emails. You appeared on cable news. You told everybody how dangerous the movement was, and then acted like parliamentary procedure was more sacred than the people who you were elected to protect. You proved yourself feckless when courage was required. You proved yourself timid when confrontation was necessary. So, I mean, you big-mouth Democrats who like to get up and with that performance stuff was asked, are you willing to abolish ICE? I'm willing to do whatever it takes to protect the American people. What the hell does that mean? You told everybody how dangerous the movement was and then acted like parliamentary procedure was more sacred than the people you were elected to protect. That was for those in the back that didn't hear me the first goddamn time. And worst of all, you appeared increasingly disinterested in representing the actual people who stood in line, knocked on doors, donated money that they could barely afford, and voted for your ass. So don't sit there now wringing your hands and asking, why are young people moving toward democratic socialism? Why are working class voters rejecting establishment candidates? Why aren't voters excited about the same politicians we've been recycling for 30 years? Look in the goddamn mirror. That's where your answer is. You cannot spend decades telling working people that affordable health care is unrealistic while approving billions for war. You cannot tell people that affordable housing is too expensive while handing tax advantages and subsidies to corporations and billionaires that are buying up the housing and overcharging people, forcing them into homelessness. You cannot tell people that raising wages is economically dangerous while CEOs make hundreds of times more than the people whose labor creates their wealth. It made me think of the story of the CEO that called a staff meeting outside in the parking lot and showed them his new Lamborghini. Yeah. And told them, if you work hard enough, I can get a new one next year. Catch the bus. You cannot watch rents explode, groceries climb, medical debt destroy families, and young people conclude that home ownership may never be possible, and then act shocked when those same people begin questioning the economic system and politicians defending it. What the hell did you think was going to happen? Democratic socialism didn't rise because somebody gave America a better pamphlet. It rose because the political establishment gave America a worse life. People are not moving left because of terminology. They're moving because their rent is too damn high. Their groceries are too expensive. Their health insurance is inadequate. Their wages aren't keeping up. Their children are buried under debt. Their neighborhoods are being bought, sold, gentrified, and priced out from underneath them. Damn, are you paying attention? In every election season, establishment politicians show up asking for another vote while offering another excuse. Well, people are tired of excuses. The rise of politicians like Zoran Mandani should not confuse establishment politics. It should educate them. But they lazy. And when voters support candidates promising to freeze rents, expand public services, improve transportation, tax extreme wealth, and make government materially improve their lives, the message is not complicated. And then when they actually do it, your cowardly ass gets scared. The people want a government that works for them, not just corporations, not just lobbyists, not just billionaires, not just donors, them. And here's the part the Democratic establishment doesn't want to hear. You helped create this moment. You sure as hell did. Every time you compromised before the fight started, you helped create it. Every time you told your own voters to lower their expectations, you helped create it. Every time you protected a political norm while the opposition bulldozed through institutions, you helped create it. Every time you campaigned as a fighter and then governed like a frightened little bitch, you helped create it. Every time you told black voters, young voters, working class voters, immigrants, women, marginalized communities that this election is the most important election of our lifetime, only to disappear after election day, that's your fault. You helped create this. Stop blaming the voters. Stop blaming young people. Stop blaming progressives. Stop blaming democratic socialists. And stop acting like the public betrayed you. The public is responding to your betrayal of their expectations. Political movements rise when existing institutions fail to answer the needs of the moment. That's history. You people read up on FDR and the New Deal and the descendants of the New Deal that gave us the Great Society. The New Deal didn't emerge because everything was going wonderfully. The labor movement didn't grow because workers were satisfied. The civil rights movement didn't erupt because the political system was delivering justice. The movements rise because somebody somewhere is effing up. And right now, the growth of democratic socialism is sending a message to the democratic establishment. You have failed to convince millions of Americans that incremental actions is enough for a crisis that is not incremental. People are losing their homes right now. People are rationing medicine right now. It's amazing to watch y'all fight for the Affordable Care Act as if that was a real solution, because it wasn't nothing but Romney care, Obama. People working 2 and 3 jobs. People watching the rights disappear now. And you're telling them to wait until the next election cycle? No. Patience to run out. The whole political vocabulary is losing power. The fear tactics aren't working like they used to. In the days when Democratic politicians could simply point across the aisle and say, at least we're not them, that's over. That's done. Being better than terrible is not a governing philosophy. being less dangerous than the opposition is not a vision for the future. And asking people to vote against something without giving them something meaningful to vote for is a political malpractice. So Democrats, if you're angry about the rise of democratic socialism, save some of that anger for yourself. Look in the mirror. Ask why people stopped believing in you. And why voters started looking elsewhere. And why a generation facing impossible rents, crushing debt, inadequate health care, stagnant wages, and an uncertain future decided that the people defending the status quo might not have the answers. And then they do something revolutionary. Do your damn job. For you, that would be revolutionary. Because the political ground beneath America is shifting. And the people who understand why it's shifting will shape what comes next. The people who don't, they'll be standing on cable television wondering how the hell they lost another goddamn election. This is Open Eye. I'm Patrice Gibbs. WHGE 95.3 FM. This is the Open Eye. Yeah? You know, and this is from the angry white dude. You see this cat. You want to hear somebody talk bad about white people? Ooh, sookie. Yeah, I tuned that up. This something I modified from him. I'm so damn tired of white men cosplaying the apocalypse every time America is forced to protect black people's rights. Damn, yeah, that's what the angry white dude said. Every time somebody talks about enforcing the Voting Rights Act, protecting ballot access, stopping racial gerrymandering, or preventing voter suppression, here comes some white man screaming about government overreach, states' rights, reverse discrimination, and the Constitution. Man, stop. The only reason we needed the Voting Rights Act in the first damn place was because white America spent generations finding creative ways to keep black people from voting. That's the history. I don't care that you personally don't see the value in the Voting Rights Act. Your great-grandfather probably didn't see the value in it either. That's why the damn thing had to be passed. The Voting Rights Act wasn't passed in ancient history. It was passed in my lifetime. And most of y'all on here listening, it was passed in your lifetime. 1965. 1965. It's 4 years old. There are people walking around right now who are alive when black citizens were being beaten, threatened, fired from their jobs, evicted from their homes, attacked by police, and sometimes murdered for attempting to exercise a constitutional right that supposedly already belonged to them. And I'm tired of this country pretending that the people responsible for that right here in America simply disappeared. They ain't disappeared. They got older. And some of them became politicians, and unfortunately some of them became judges, some of them became police chiefs, and some of them business owners. Some became respectable members of their communities. And some of them became grandma and grandpa. America wants to talk about racism and this, as if every racist died in 1968 and everybody born after magically emerged from the womb free of everything their parents taught them. That's nonsense. So no, white boy, I do not care that you suddenly think racial protections are unnecessary. I don't care that you think we move beyond race. I don't care that somebody told you racism ended because Barack Obama became president. And of course, what most of y'all say is, oh, there wasn't no racism until Barack Obama became president. The dumbest crap you ever wanted to hear. Yeah, that's word. And I certainly don't care that protecting black voting rights makes you uncomfortable. Your comfort was never the purpose of civil rights legislation. The Voting Rights Act is this because this country had to put it in writing that black people are citizens and that white officials cannot simply invent another literacy test, poll tax, Godfather clause, intimidation campaign, or bureaucratic obstacle every time black political power becomes inconvenient. Think about how absurd that is. America has needed law after law after law surrounding race because generation after generation of white Americans refuse to simply leave black people the hell alone. The Civil Rights Act essentially had to tell people you cannot deny somebody's service because they are black. The Fair Housing Act had to tell people you cannot legally lock black families out of neighborhoods because they're black. The Voting Rights Act had to tell governments you cannot deliberately prevent black citizens from voting because they black. Do you understand how insane that is? White America had to be told in writing not to be awful. They had to put it in writing for you not to be an asshole. And that's the part nobody wants to discuss because laws do not appear out of nowhere. Laws are responses to behavior. When society repeatedly does something destructive, abusive, or discriminatory, eventually somebody has to write a law saying, stop doing that shit. And when you complain about civil rights protections, I want to know why your anger is directed at the protection instead of the behavior that made that protection necessary. Why are you angry at the Voting Rights Act instead of suppression, voter suppression? Why are you angry at affirmative remedies instead of centuries of deliberate exclusion that created the inequality? Why are you angry when black people demand protection but strangely silent about the people from whom we need the protection from? See, that's the game America keeps playing. Attack the medicine, ignore the disease, condemn the shield, excuse the sword. And here we are in the year of our Lord, 2026, still debating whether black voting power deserves protection. Damn. Oh, we did this, we did that. Anyway. Well, you don't get credit for taking your boot halfway off of somebody's neck. You certainly don't get to complain that the person underneath your boot is being divisive for mentioning that your foot is still there. The most frightening thing about history is not that our ancestors lived through monsters, it's that the monsters had children. And we still have to write laws that tell them not to be awful, racist, ignorant, oppressive son of a bitches. Damn. This is the open eye. WHGE 95.3 FM, the Open Eye. Oh, don't think I'm going to forget my mans. Oh, yeah, today America celebrates itself. Flags are flying, the fireworks are ready, the grills are smoking. Politicians are giving speeches about liberty, freedom, courage, and the birth of a nation. But before black people get too comfortable waving that flag, we need to remember that Frederick Douglass asked America a question more than 170 years ago that this nation has never fully answered. What to the American slave is your 4th of July? Think about the power of that question. Not our 4th of July, your 4th of July. Because when America declared its independence on July 4th, 1776, black people were not declared free. We were property. We were inventory. We were collateral. We were bought, sold, raped, beaten, bred, inherited, mortgaged, and murdered. The men declaring that all men are created equal are living in a society where human beings were being sold on auction blocks. So what exactly were black people supposed to celebrate? Freedom? Whose freedom? Liberty? Whose liberty? Independence? Independence from who? That was the heart of Frederick Douglass's challenge. He stood before America on July 5th, 1852, and forced the nation to look at the hypocrisy buried beneath its celebration. You could not celebrate liberty while holding people in chains. You could not praise freedom while hunting human beings with dogs. You could not quote the Declaration of Independence in the morning and sell somebody's child in the afternoon and rape that child at night. In America, spent generations trying to celebrate the poetry of its founding while refusing to confront the brutality of its reality. Black people have always had a complicated relationship with the 4th of July because America has always had a complicated relationship with black freedom. We fought in America's wars before America recognized our citizenship. We built America's wealth before America recognized our humanity. We harvested the crops, built the roads, cleared the land, raised the children, cooked the food, built the institutions, created the music, and fought the revolution, fought the Civil War, fought World War I, II, Korea, Vietnam, Iraq, and after fighting for democracy overseas, black soldiers repeatedly returned home to segregation, racial terror, discrimination, and second-class citizenship. America kept asking black people to defend freedoms that America itself refused to fully extend to black people. And that's the contradiction. And that contradiction did not disappear when slavery ended. Frederick Douglass asked his question in 1852. More than a century later, black people still needed a Voting Rights Act because parts of America refused to respect the citizenship supposedly guaranteed us. And here we are in 2026, and what is America doing? Trying to invalidate our very citizenship. What to the slave is the independence of America. Think about it. This is the Open Eye. Patrice Gibbs. WHGE 95.3 FM. Speaking of independence, this is a question that comes up whenever Americans get uncomfortable with their current state. I equate this question to Frederick Douglass' question. What to the American slave was the 4th of July? So when these same people turn around expecting us to celebrate and then ask, what would the founding fathers do? Seriously? Why are we in the year 2026 still asking what a collection of 18th century human traffickers would do? Help me understand why I'm supposed to give a single damn about the opinions of men who cross oceans to traffic human beings, sexually exploit them, and then had the audacity to sit in a candlelit room writing poetry about freedom for all. This is insanity. If those men stepped into 2026 today, they wouldn't be offering political advice. They would literally pass out. Barack Obama was president, they would have lost their wigs. You want me to care what Thomas Jefferson thought? The great philosopher of American liberty? Let's talk about that reality. Jefferson enslaved Sally Hemings, his late wife's younger half-sister. He fathered her children while holding absolute unchecked power over her life. Her quarters were just a step from his bedroom for convenience. Think about the geography of that trauma. She was his legal property. She couldn't pack a bag. She couldn't say no. She could not meet him as an equal, and yet the history books want to dress that up as if it was some kind of romance. When the hell did rape become romantic? Goddamn pedophile. No, we're not going to romanticize sexual access of a slaveholder. I will not dress domination up as love. Just because some dictator wrote beautiful prose. I don't give a damn what Jefferson would have thought of us. I care about what Sally Hemings would think of the fact that America still spends more time protecting his reputation than confronting the hypocrisy at the foundation of this nation. And that brings us to the ultimate sellout commentary. We just recently heard Barack Obama got up and said, it's possible for me to be a great admirer of George Washington and also acknowledge he was a slaveholder. That does not negate his greatness. It simply acknowledges that there's a profound, deep flaw. A deep flaw? The hell you talking about, Barack? Damn. I'm sorry, but we got to stop sanitizing atrocity with polite language. A deep flaw is arrogance. Okay? A deep flaw is selfishness. A deep flaw is having a terrible temper. A deep flaw is being dishonest, vain, stubborn, or cruel. Human trafficking is not a personality flaw. You got your mind? Enslaving human beings is not a character quirk. Selling children away from their mothers, that's not an imperfection. Working human beings under threat of violence is not an unfortunate footnote of greatness. The entire vocabulary changes when the victims are black. See, that's what I want you to notice. When Europeans suffer mass atrocity, the perpetrators are monsters. Hitler. When Africans suffer mass atrocity, suddenly we're invited to discuss historical context, complexity, contradiction, and nuance, and the danger of judging people by modern standards. No. There were people alive in George Washington's time who knew slavery was wrong. The enslaved people knew it was wrong. The people running away knew it was wrong. The people resisting knew it was wrong. The abolitionists knew it was wrong. You cannot tell me that somebody understood the immorality of slavery when the people being enslaved were constantly trying to escape it. They ain't understand that, they didn't understand the immorality. What greater evidence do you need? And I'm not saying that every historical atrocity is identical. I am saying we should pay attention to the moral language we use. Where anybody described Adolf Hitler as a genius with a flaw, and that flaw just happened to be genocide. Would the people of the Democratic Republic of the Congo be expected to admire Leopold of Belgium while calmly acknowledging that the terror, forced labor, mutilation, and mass death associated with his colonial regime represented a deep flaw? And why are black people constantly asked to separate the accomplishments of enslavers from the human beings they enslaved? Why must we admire the architect and ignore the bodies buried beneath the building? And let me say something else. Black people in America are taught white supremacy both consciously and subliminally. Not just through racial slurs, not just through segregation, not just through open discrimination. We are taught white supremacy through hero selection, through monuments, through textbook, holidays, through the very currency in your pocket, through presidential mythology, through the constant instruction that certain white men must remain respectable no matter what they did to black people. From childhood, we are taught that the founders were brilliant intellectuals, worthy of unquestioned respect. We memorize their words, their birthdays. We visit their plantations and call them historical homes. We name cities, streets, schools, universities, and government buildings after them. And then somewhere near the bottom of the page in a paragraph small enough to overlook, America quietly mentions it. Oh, by the way, they own some human beings. Own some human beings. Let's use the language properly. They bought people, they sold people, they pursued people who escaped, they separated families. They extracted labor through coercion and violence. They treated human beings as inheritable property. And then they wrote about freedom. That contradiction is not a footnote to the American story. That contradiction is the American story. Americans always possess a magnificent vocabulary of freedom and a terrifying ability to decide who gets included in that definition. So stop asking me what the founding fathers would do. I'm more interested in what Frederick Douglass would do, what Harriet Tubman would do, what David Walker would do, what Nat Turner would do, what Ida B. Wells would do, what W.E.B. Du Bois would do, what Marcus Garvey would do, what Malcolm and Martin would do. That's right, Dave. Black people were never part of we the people. Why is the political imagination of America permanently trapped inside the minds of wealthy 18th century white men? Why aren't the enslaved considered founders? The enslaved built the economy, cleared the land, harvested the crops, constructed the buildings, and generated wealth that they would never inherit. And the next time somebody asks me what the founding fathers would do, my answer is simple. I don't know, and I don't particularly give a damn. Because the question is not what they would do. The question is, what are we going to do? And are we going to continue worshiping men simply because America told us they were great? Or are we finally mature enough to understand that eloquence does not erase exploitation? Stop asking what the founding fathers would do and start asking what would the people they enslaved have done if they had possessed the power to write the Constitution. Now that's the question worth answering. Question the heroes, examine the monuments, interrogate the mythology, and whenever America tells you that a great man, that a man was great, always ask, great for who? Shit. I'll flaw my ass. Must be kidding. This is the Open Eye. I'm Patrice Gibbs. WHGE 95.3 FM. Well, y'all, we coming around to the close. I don't want to leave you with this. Freedom is not a holiday. Freedom's not a parade. It's not a flag. It's not fireworks exploding in the sky when injustice continues on the ground. Freedom is power. The power to determine where you live. The power to educate your children. The power to control the economics of your community. The power to hold politicians accountable. The power to defend your history. The power to define yourself. The power to organize without asking permission for those who benefit from your disorganization. That's freedom. And if July 4th is going to mean anything to black people, it cannot simply be about remembering somebody else's revolution. We must remember our own. The revolution of Frederick Douglass, Harriet Tubman, and Nat Turner. Of Malcolm X and Martin Luther King Jr., the revolution of the countless black men and women who resisted slavery, segregation, colonialism, apartheid, police brutality, economic exploitation, and every system designed to convince African people that power belongs naturally to somebody else. Our ancestors did not survive everything they survived so that we could become spectators. They did not endure the slave ship so we could be afraid to organize. They did not survive plantations so we could spend every dollar outside our communities. They did not fight segregation so we could voluntarily surrender our political power. They did not build churches, schools, newspapers, businesses, mutual aid societies, banks, unions, liberation movements, so we could sit around waiting for somebody else to rescue us. And always remember, the ancestors gave us the blueprint. Organize, educate, build, protect, invest, infiltrate, control institutions, hold leadership accountable, and stop confusing visibility with power. Being seen is not the same thing as being free. Being entertained is not the same thing as being empowered. Being represented is not the same thing as controlling resources. And having black faces in high places mean very little if those black faces are not accountable to black people. And don't get up and say dumb crap like the great were flawed. So America's 250 years old today. That's a long time to make promises. And black people waited long enough for America to become the country it claims to be. Our future cannot depend entirely upon whether America finally discovers its conscience. Our future must also depend upon whether we discover our power. The ancestors are watching. The children are watching. History is watching. And the question before us is not simply, what did America do? The question is, what are we prepared to do? Keep your mind sharp, keep your history close, and keep your people closer. And remember, you have two eyes for looking, but you only need one open eye for seeing. Hope you learned something today, because I learned something before I got here. And as we always tell you, destiny determines who enters your life, but you decide who stays. Therefore, value those who value you, and don't treat those as a priority who treat you as an option. This has been Open Eye on the 4th of July. Thanks for joining us. I'm Patrice Gibbs. Peace. Thanks, Vaughn. All right. As I always tell you, global African supremacy, the world was a much better place when Africa ruled. Watch Ibrahim Touré in Burkina Faso. Oh yeah, he just kicked France out completely. That's what global African supremacy is coming. I'm Patrice Gibbs. Thanks for joining me. Peace.